Alrighty, so today interesting things will happen. So, okay, foot of the month, or accessory of the month technically, because the circular attachment is the foot. This is one of the boxes for the Bernina circular attachment, and as far as I know, that one will fit just about any machine, even though Bernina's still labeling it red and white box. This is my most recent one, which is the really close to the original packaging. The one in this box is my very first and original circular attachment. And I've had that one for at least 25 years. So good news, bad news is they really haven't changed all that much over time. And then, whoa, for the other kids in the crowd, this is the Brother circular attachment. And it has a few fun things in it. It comes with a braiding foot, a cording foot, and a protractor. Who remembers protractors? I couldn't remember that word this morning when I was talking to my other class. Protractor. So there's some math help in this box to make your circles. And a little instruction booklet comes in all of them. Now, I already stitched something out today, so you guys could kind of see it. Alrighty, so I'm going to take the protective cover off and hope I don't bleed. I just did this one. I wanted you to see when you have something that's hard to put into a circle, when you would be, say, just manually turning the fabric under the foot. I did Made to Create, which is Bernina's, part of Bernina's logo and byline. And I just wanted you to see, I also did a couple flowers here that have what we would call a baseline under them. So when it goes from this flower to this flower, it travels. So the lettering comes out so perfectly smooth. And in the circle that I did here, this size, whoosh, let's see how far I got. This circle is roughly 4.5 inches across. The words Made to Create, I managed to get into that circle 3 times. So that was a little testing on my part. Now, couple things. There's a couple different ways to set this up on the machine. And there's 2 little holes here. And there's kind of a little punch out. And then a screw hole here. The accessory comes with a protective cap, 2 screws, 1 and a spare, and a lovely little screwdriver so that you can get in under everything here. Let me switch hands so you can see, because it's really hard to get a regular screwdriver in here. So those are all in the box, ready and able to help you. What you might see here, you kind of see this little scallopy edge here. That little scallopy edge is for setting the circumference of the circle. So this little bit moves and it locks into each one of those. And kind of, you hear it go bump, bump, bump. So in close here, of course, is a very small circle. The pin will be the center of the circle. And then each one of those makes a slightly bigger circle. Some fun things that you can do, applique circles. So I have this beautiful print here. And I've got a fusible woven on the back of each of these just to give them a little more body. I could actually have fusible on the back of there. The other thing I'm going to put down on here right now is a piece of cutaway stabilizer. What happens is sometimes your cottons get excited and as you're working through them, the hole here will start to grow. And we don't want it to grow. Let's find the center of this fabric. We're just going to fold it into 4, give it a little pinch there. And then I'm going to drop the center of that circle right down on here. And put the little protective cover back on, because that little pin is super sharp and quite willing to hurt you. I'm going to make a fairly small circle, just in the interest of time. Maybe I want more circles, so I'll leave some room on here. So I'm going to just pop out to my home screen. And for the moment, just select a regular old straight stitch. Nothing fancy, nothing particular. And what I'm going to do is just stitch a circle. Now, the best thing you can do for this is not to micromanage it too much. You want to use a slow, steady pace and make sure that nothing buckles, pinches, or pull, and that you don't have this on so hard that the project can't turn. So we'll just let that go around and just try not to help it, especially when you get to those fancy stitches. And you want to make sure that whatever you're working on is not so heavy that it can't move, and that there's nothing impeding it behind the machine, or you're not hitting the side or getting caught up on other parts. So I'm right back to where I started now. Just going to cut my thread there. And what I'm going to do is take the cotton piece off. I'll just leave the stabilizer on there for a minute. And then with some little trimming scissors, I'm just going to get in there. And I'm going to trim the raw edge down to something a little more manageable than that big ugly square, because we're working on circles today. Alrighty. So I'm going to very carefully relocate that back through the hole. I can still kind of see it from 2 seconds ago. Maybe let's do something fun. This is just a fun sample after all. I often use decorative stitch applique, and often they have a straight edge on them, which makes things kind of awkward. Say, I'm going to try this one. So pretty much any stitch on your machine could be selected. You could even be making a blanket stitch. I'm going to pick a pointed satin stitch. Looks like little arrows. I'll do that one as well, just for you to see. Alrighty, back to where I started. I'm gonna hit those scissors. All right, so you can see that curved satin stitching. Beautiful. That's I picked a sort of a leafy stitch there. It's a little harder to see. Show it to you on the back. There's a bar and a little leaf and a line of this little leaf. And then there's that heavy satin stitch. There's that sort of inside-outside blanket stitch, and then that lovely arrow. So then can see, even though I was going around a corner with those arrows, because of the circular attachment, it twirls those out as just as pretty as can be, nice and even with a perfect slant. That double blanket stitch landed right in the middle of the edge, which is quite nice. So I've got a little detail in and out. So that's just something fun we could do with it. Now the other, remember I said there was no particular project I had in mind? Not on this piece. That was just for fun. Cut my stabilizer out of there because I want this. So I'm going to show you just kind of in super graphic terms. See, going around that circle, you can see how that hole grew. This is tearaway stabilizer, so of course I've over exaggerated the point, but sometimes when you have just straight up cotton, and maybe you're going around the circle a number of times, after a while it can stretch and then not quite line up. What a great little tip, a little bit of a free advice is this was just a random scrap of cutaway stabilizer. It was actually a fusible one. I have 3 layers here because this was a light one. I just folded the remnant over and pressed it. So this is quite firm. It's actually about the size of a draw ticket and about the same consistency. But that helps stabilize the hole. It doesn't need to be all that big. I could cut it down a little bit. Make it just a small little square so it doesn't get sewn into my piece. Then something I have at home and tend to comes out at this time of year. I have some big fat pillar candles. They're in beautiful autumn colors and they have a lovely scent to them, but that color and maybe the scent can stain my fancy table and maybe I don't want that. So maybe we take a lovely piece of wool felt. This one's called Tahitian Sunset. I love the color of it. We could do a couple things. I'm going to make this pretty much as big as I can with this piece of felt right now, but I'm just going to go with a straight stitch. I am using the 20D because earlier, that Made to Create, I did that stitch out on a 3-layer essentially quilt, and I was pretty sure my D foot would help me work that through. Do you remember? So there we go. A back batting and the front, because often the very next question in a demonstration like this, the very first question is, could I quilt circles with that? You absolutely can. The problem that might arise is the weight or the size of the quilt in this space. You'll have to go pretty slow. You'll have to manage the weight, make sure that there's no drag at all, because drag will distort. And enough drag and you can actually move that pin out of the way. And, you know, that could be an annoying little nightmare because your circles won't be perfect. And, of course, at the end of the day, that's what we're hoping for. There. So I've made it all the way around there. I know that this circle's big enough for that pillar candle I have at home. I'm thinking for this project, I want to show you a couple other little things. I am going to relocate this, show you a couple different things. Don't want to fling the screw across the room. I want to keep it. I have thrown them across the room. Spent a good amount of time. Okay. So you see you've got that hole here and then this little bump out. And over here we have that same hole and another little bump out. So I can mount this to my machine this way. The way I had it, this way, right there. And on my extra wide Bernina here, I have also mounted it this way. What I get out of this way is a much larger circle. So I believe that the packaging says we can get about a 10-inch circle on the longest length. And that is true if we mount this way and go all the way to the end there. But I've also tried this on my great big Bernina, and it gives you a bigger circle because this is not around the stitch plate. So something interesting to think about. The Brother one is not quite as flexible from that standpoint, the way it attaches to the machine. So I'm gonna put this in the other way, and we'll go again. And then before I tighten that down all the way, I'm just going to check this line here. The curve on the front of this machine makes you sometimes think that this is straight and attached when it's not. So what I've done is visually I've lined up the inside of this plate on the seam allowance lines on the actual machine. Tighten that down. I did put a wee bit of iron-on polymesh, fusible polymesh on the back of this, just to help with this circle, because this is just a piece of wool felt and it would distort pretty easy. So I'm going to put my hole protector there, and then I'm going to remount this. It takes a little bit of practice. So I've just bumped this over a couple so that the toe is right on top of that straight stitch from earlier. And it was just for me a visual measurement of the circle so that I could clearly see the parameters that I had. And we're just going to make a little candle mat. One of the other things we could make, and we were talking about it earlier, was pin cushion. Now, with a little bit of practice, you'll be able to find out if this doesn't end quite right. You can play with the movement on here and have these little arcs end in the exact right spot, or you get a little creative. And if they end in a really bad manner where they don't look nice at all, it's just an opportunity to embellish. Put a small other circle on top of there. If it's not going to have something sitting on it like this one for my candle mat, put a little button on it. Get creative if you don't like how they end. So I'm getting close to where these are going to meet up. I left this big tail out here because it helps me identify. Stop, start. Sometimes once the foot gets on there, you can't really see where you're going. coming right up on the end here. I think I'm going to get super lucky, and really, people, it's often about luck. I'm going to go into my machine and tell it that I want one repeat. So what it's going to do, it's going to stop at the end of this one. I honestly think, looking at the size, I'm going to be able to sneak one in there almost perfectly. And because of the feathery nature of these edges, people aren't really going to know if you didn't. Whoa. So those are so close together. I think I'm going to call that a super win. And I've just switched to a straight stitch. And I'm going to turn it way down. And I'm going to just do a little tiny back stitch between those two. And then cut my thread to tie it off. I've left that there so you can see that was my stop start. And look at that, you guys. Almost perfect. Close enough for the kids I hang with. And then, what I might do, I'm going to select that same stitch that I just did. And I'm going to mirror image it. And I'm going to put it out here. And I'm going to try to start it right across from where that one was. Let it do its knot thing. I'm stitching right over that original outer circle. And you'll just see go. So there's that first stop. It came out almost perfect. That one had a wee tiny overlap. But if I spun this around 10 times and then said you have 3 seconds to locate that blip, you might not be able to see it. And you can see that the scallops started to shift because different arc, they didn't line up. It would be very difficult. We'd have to change the size of that arc. And that, that would take someone who's far more excited about math than I am. Hey, there you are. So, all I'm thinking about doing here is cutting out 1/8 of an inch from that scallop edge. And then using this as a candle mat so that my lovely autumn candles, the color doesn't transfer to a tablecloth, doesn't transfer to the wood if I put it straight down on one of my tables. And this will just protect the table from the wax, from the color, from the scent. And it's just a super simple thing. You could absolutely make perfect circles. This is a pincushion. Perfect circle. we have, you don't own an embroidery machine, you should, but besides the point, there are walnut shell pin cushion inserts. And that's what's in here. It makes it lovely and firm and heavy, and something you could quite nicely poke your pins and needles into and save them for a decoration. Or save them from falling on the floor, landing in your feet, landing in the bottom of your foot. Oh, those hurt. But there's so many little things you could do. Like I've shown, the circle applique, if you put 2 layers of fabric together. This one is a square. I could pop this front off. I could pop this down on my thing and sew a circle around the heart instead of a square. And that'd be kind of cool. This one was digitized for us. But, you know, I quite like these little things, and I quite like my circular attachments. So there you have it.